Colombia, late 1980s. The country was mired in an undeclared internal war. Drug trafficking, led by the infamous Medellín Cartel and its leader Pablo Escobar, was waging a brutal campaign of terror. Murders, bombings, kidnappings, and extortion were part of everyday life. The state was struggling, with great difficulty, to uphold institutional order in the face of an enemy that openly challenged its authority. The cartel had intensified its campaign of terror against the government following the approval of an extradition treaty with the United States, which allowed drug traffickers to be sent to American prisons. While all this was happening, people were trying to go on with their lives as normally as possible. One example is Avianca Flight 203, which is currently waiting at the Bogotá airport to depart for Cali. November 27, 1989. El Dorado International Airport, Bogotá, Colombia. It is 7 a.m. local time, and Avianca Flight 203 is taxiing toward its assigned runway. This flight covers the domestic route between El Dorado International Airport and Alfonso Bonilla Aragon International Airport in Cali. On board are 101 passengers and 6 crew members, totaling 107 souls. The aircraft was a Boeing 727-21, registration HK-1803, a narrow-body jet with 3 rear-mounted engines and a capacity for approximately 149 passengers in a high-density configuration. It was one of the most popular models for medium-range routes in Latin America during the 1980s, valued for its ruggedness and ability to operate in airports with limited infrastructure. Manufactured in 1966 and originally delivered to Pan Am before being transferred to Avianca in 1975, this 40.6-meter-long 727 was equipped with 3 Pratt & Whitney JT8D7 engines, each delivering 14,000 pounds of thrust. It had accumulated 48,000 flight hours, and its last inspection, conducted in October 1989, reported no anomalies. Avianca, Colombia's national airline, was already one of the oldest and most prestigious in the world. Founded in 1919, it was a symbol of national pride. With an extensive network of both domestic and international routes, it was Colombia's flagship carrier and the second oldest airline in the world. In 1989, it operated a fleet of 55 aircraft, including 10 Boeing 727s. At the controls of the 727 was Captain José Ignacio Osa Aristizabal. While no detailed public information is available about his exact number of flight hours, he was known to be an experienced pilot with the necessary training and certifications to command commercial flights of this scale. He was accompanied by First Officer Fernando Pizarro Esguerra and Flight Engineer Jairo Castiblanco Vargas, both of whom were also part of Avianca's regular flight crew. Rounding out the crew were 3 flight attendants, Germán Pereira, Astrid Gomez, and Rita Galvez. Among the 101 passengers were both Colombian and foreign citizens, including professionals such as Maria Cristina Reyes, a lawyer traveling for work, as well as families and ordinary citizens. Also scheduled to travel on this flight was César Gaviria Trujillo, a presidential candidate and future president of Colombia from 1990 to 1994. However, he did not board the flight due to a last-minute decision by his security team. At 7:11 a.m., Avianca Flight 203 began taxiing down the runway. The aircraft took off without incident and began its journey to Cali. On board the 727 was Alberto Prieto, nicknamed El Suizo. Alberto Prieto was a young Colombian from a humble background whose life was cut short after being used by the Medellín Cartel as an unwitting bomber. The nickname El Suizo, the Swiss in English, comes from Colombian criminal slang, used to describe someone who, unknowingly, is used as a suicide operative in terrorist missions. The term reflects the cold-blooded way in which the cartel manipulated individuals for its objectives. Prieto had been convinced by cartel members to carry a suitcase that, he was told, contained a recorder meant to capture conversations of alleged cartel informants. What Prieto didn't know was that activating the device would trigger a bomb. Alberto Prieto boarded Flight 203 accompanied by another individual identified as Julio Santo Domingo, who was in fact a cartel member. The two sat in seats 15E and 15F, strategically located over the aircraft's fuel tanks. Shortly before takeoff, Santo Domingo left the aircraft, leaving Prieto alone with the suitcase containing the explosive. The flight proceeded normally for the first 3 minutes. At 0714 UTC, the Boeing 727 reached 13,000 feet, flying over Soacha, 16 kilometers southwest of Bogotá. 2 minutes later, at 7:16, following the instructions he had been given, Alberto Prieto activated the device, believing he was turning on a recorder. This triggered the explosion of 1 kilogram of dynamite hidden inside the suitcase, causing severe damage to the aircraft's right wing. The massive explosion tore through the aircraft's structure. The cabin depressurized violently, ripping parts of the fuselage apart. The tail section detached almost immediately, resulting in a total loss of control. The burning wreckage fell over Soacha, a densely populated municipality. The explosion instantly killed all 107 people on board, and debris struck a residential area, killing 3 people on the ground. Witnesses reported seeing a fireball in the sky and fragments falling onto homes and fields. The crash was classified as an act of terrorism, the first of its kind targeting a commercial flight in Colombia. What had happened? How did they manage to get a bomb onto the plane? The investigation was led by Colombia's Directorate of Criminal Investigation and Interpol, with support from the US FBI and Boeing, due to the nature of the aircraft involved and the international implications of the attack. Investigators arrived at the crash site in Soacha on November 27, 1989, just hours after the tragedy, confronting a chaotic scene of scattered wreckage and a deeply affected local community. The final report was published in 1990 after a year of thorough analysis and confirmed what many had suspected from the beginning. The crash was not caused by mechanical failure, but by a deliberate act of terrorism. The black boxes were recovered from the wreckage on November 28th, although they were severely damaged by the explosion. Despite this, data recovered from the FDR confirmed that the Boeing 727-21 reached 13,000 feet at 0716 when an explosion occurred near the right wing, disintegrating the plane mid-air. The CVR, though fragmented, captured a high-intensity sound consistent with a detonation, followed by an abrupt cutoff in the recordings, supporting the bomb hypothesis. The DIGIN report, backed by the FBI, determined that the cause of the crash was a bomb containing approximately 1 kilogram of dynamite, placed in the passenger compartment and triggered by an altimeter set to detonate at 13,000 feet. The bomb had been brought on board by a young Colombian, Alberto Prieto, who had been deceived by the Medellín Cartel into carrying what he believed was a recording device. The primary target of the attack was César Gaviria, a presidential candidate and staunch advocate of extraditing drug traffickers to the United States. Gaviria, who had previously received threats from the Medellín Cartel, did not board the flight due to a last-minute decision by his security team, a decision that saved his life. However, the cartel, led by Pablo Escobar, also sought to send a message to the Colombian government. No one was safe as long as the extradition treaty remained in effect. The aircraft wreckage showed clear signs of an explosion. Fragments of the fuselage near the right wing displayed damage consistent with a high-energy detonation. The FBI identified traces of plastic explosives, likely Semtex, on the remains, a material commonly used by terrorist groups at the time. The investigation also revealed that the bomb had been placed under a seat in the forward section of the aircraft, near the fuel tank, which amplified the effects of the explosion by triggering a massive fire. A key factor in the success of the attack was the lack of adequate security controls at El Dorado Airport. In 1989, passenger and baggage screening measures in Colombia were limited, especially for domestic flights. Metal detectors and X-ray machines were not as advanced as they are today, and security personnel were not trained to detect threats such as plastic explosives. Additionally, the war on drug trafficking had overwhelmed Colombian authorities, who were facing multiple bombings and assassinations each week, making it difficult to implement stricter security protocols. The Avianca Flight 203 bombing bears similarities to other acts of aerial terrorism, such as Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, which occurred just 11 months earlier on December 21, 1988. In that attack, a bomb also destroyed a Boeing 747, killing 270 people. Both incidents highlighted the vulnerability of commercial aviation to terrorism in the 1980s and led to changes in global security protocols, although these changes would take years to be fully implemented. However, Flight 203 was unique in its context. It was a direct attack by a drug cartel against a state, an act of internal warfare that marked a turning point in Colombia's battle against the Medellín Cartel. While the official version of the Flight 203 bombing directly blamed the Medellín Cartel and Pablo Escobar as the masterminds, later investigations and testimonies revealed in reports such as a crack in the official story have cast doubt on key aspects of the case. The dominant narrative, that the aim was to assassinate César Gaviria Trujillo, has been questioned due to inconsistencies in timing, flight routes, and unverified key testimonies. One of the most striking issues is the story of Alberto Prieto, aka El Suezo, who was allegedly used as an unwitting bomber. According to these investigations, Prieto was unknowingly manipulated into activating the bomb, believing it to be a recorder. However, the lack of an official identification of his body, inconsistencies in boarding records, and the absence of direct evidence raise questions about his true role and how many individuals were actually involved in the attack. The report also suggests that part of the operation may have involved internal complicity at Bogotá Airport, allowing the explosive device to bypass security controls. These gaps in the official investigation left open wounds among the victims' families, who, even decades later, continue to demand full truth and justice regarding what happened on that fateful flight. The story of Flight 203 is not only a reflection of the power and brutality of drug trafficking, it is also an example of how, at times, official accounts can conceal as many shadows as the tragedies they attempt to explain. The bombing of Avianca Flight 203 shook Colombia and the entire world. The brutality of the attack, its cold-blooded execution, and the immense suffering it caused marked a turning point in the fight against narco-terrorism in Latin America. Immediately after the bombing, the Colombian government, under intense internal and international pressure, intensified its offensive against the Medellín Cartel. The United States, horrified by the deaths of 2 American citizens on the flight, also ramped up its support in terms of intelligence, funding, and military cooperation. The indiscriminate murder of innocent civilians shifted public perception of Pablo Escobar. Once seen by some marginalized communities as a Robin Hood figure, he came to be regarded as a public enemy reviled by the majority of Colombian society. The Flight 203 bombing cemented his image as a ruthless terrorist, accelerating the formation of special forces dedicated to capturing him and ultimately leading to his downfall in 1993. In addition, the tragedy spurred profound reforms in air security protocols. Baggage screening was tightened, new explosive detection technologies were implemented, and stricter security standards were established for both domestic and international flights. Avianca Flight 203 was a tragedy that went beyond aviation to become a symbol of the terror inflicted by drug trafficking in Colombia. A Boeing 727, 107 lives on board, 3 on the ground, and a country scarred by the violence of the Medellín Cartel. The investigation confirmed that a bomb, ordered by Pablo Escobar, destroyed the plane in an attempt to assassinate César Gaviria and send a message to the state. This attack exposed the vulnerabilities of 1980s aviation and the brutality of a war that claimed thousands of victims. The Flight 203 bombing has been portrayed or referenced in various audiovisual and literary works. Escobar, El Patrón del Mal, a Colombian series depicting the harsh reality of narco-violence during those years. Los Tiempos de Pablo Escobar, National Geographic, a documentary featuring testimonies about the bombing. Pablo Escobar, Beyond Narcos, Netflix, a documentary series analyzing the Medellín Cartel's methods of terror. Killing Pablo by Mark Bowden, a book detailing the pursuit and downfall of Escobar, mentioning Flight 203. La Parábola de Pablo by Alonso Salazar, a journalistic chronicle of the Kingpin's rise and fall, also covering the attack. Today, we've revisited November 27, 1989, a day that left a lasting scar on Colombia in fire and blood. Avianca Flight 203 reminds us of the human cost of narco-terrorism and the resilience of a nation that fought to emerge from the shadows. Thank you for joining me in this analysis. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories like this. Which flight would you like me to analyze in future videos? Let me know in the comments. Before I go, I want to welcome the newest member of the channel, Abuse Intake. Welcome aboard.